Okay, for this video we're going to learn about JavaScript date objects. So I have a file here called date.js on my desktop, and there is a built-in variable called date, and I can use this a couple of different ways. It's designed to be a constructor, so we mentioned constructors in the last video with objects. So I can use new date, left and right parentheses. And I can create a variable d and save this date in here. Console.log. And go ahead and have some nice headings. So this is just a new date, and we'll log that out. Oops, open up FileZilla there. So node and date.js, and we see it prints out the date like this. Alright, now this date, there's a couple different ways to view this. JavaScript automatically converted this. This is an object, and it automatically converted it to this format. There's several different formats. I'll close that. Several different formats to choose from. So this is by itself, which the default format in browser JavaScript is actually different than that. To string. Okay, so this is going to take the date and then convert that into a string representation. Okay, and this is more the default in the browser that you'll more generally see. Okay, so we have the day of the week, the month, the day of the month, the date or the year. Then we have the time, right? Hours, minutes, seconds. You can even have milliseconds. You do have a time zone, right? That sort of stuff. Another version of the date is to ISO string. ISO is an acronym meaning International Standards Organization. So the International Standards Organization has a method that they believe is a good standard to encode times. All right, and that is this up here. So in Node, apparently it defaults to the ISO standard when you just print out to the console a date by itself. All right, now what this is year hyphen month hyphen day, and then the T means what's up next is the time, and you have the time, and this is usually in UTC time, right? So you have the time in hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and then Z, which normally I believe means UTC time. All right, so that's a couple of different ways to output the date. Another way you can do that is console.log, and we can get the individual components of this. Okay, so first we want to get time. Now this is not what you might think it would be. Okay, we might think that this just might be the hours, minutes, and seconds, but that's not the case. What this is actually is the number of milliseconds since 1970, January 1st at midnight, the very beginning of the year. Okay, so if you do the math on this, you can show that it actually is pretty accurate. Okay, so console.log, and I want to log out d.getTime. Okay, so that should be milliseconds. If I divide that by 1,000, that should be seconds, right? And if I divide that by 60, that should be minutes. If I divide that by 60, that should be hours. And if I divide that by 24, that should be days. And if I divide that by approximately 365, I say approximately because of leap years and whatnot, so 365 days, this should give us the number of years. Okay, so if I save this and run the code, sure enough, 50 years. So 1970 plus 20, or plus 50 is 2020, and then some change because we're about 0.25 way through this year, right? March 15th or so. Okay, so we see that this is accurate. It's the number of milliseconds since midnight January 1st. And you might think that that's not very useful, but more often than not, you use these milliseconds more than anything else. Okay? Because it allows you to take differences in time. If I want a time to see how long it took JavaScript to do something, I'm going to almost always use d.getTime. Right? So I could create a date and then say d.getTime. There's also a shortcut for that, date.now. Now this is a function that does not need to be instantiated with new. If I'm creating a new date, I do have to use new. If I'm just calling date.now, this is going to return, at this exact moment in time, it's going to return the number of milliseconds. So this is, a lot of times you'll see some code like this, let now equal date.now. And this is going to be console.log milliseconds. Okay. Now notice that this is this should be more milliseconds than we previously had because time is going forward. Right. So here we got. Oh, it's barely more because date up here, and then we ran this code, which didn't take very long at all. It took, it looks like 2 milliseconds to run, but still, this new date is 2 milliseconds after this other date. So one thing to notice is the last time you called date, that number is going to be the biggest. Okay, so how is this useful? Specifically, if I want to time how long it takes to do something. Okay, so for example, let's make a for loop, a very simple for loop in JavaScript. For let I equal 0, while I is less than, so we'll say, is that 100 million? So we want this loop to go 100 million times, and then we're going to have some calculation in here that doesn't matter. Let x equal 42 times 36 plus 12.2 or something. Okay, so JavaScript is going to perform this calculation, but we don't care. We're not doing anything with it. The whole point is for this to take some time. And then after this executes, this should take a little bit of time. We should get a new value. Let, this is the ending time. So this is going to be another date.now. Or I could instantiate a new date and say date.getTime. Okay, so the whole point here is maybe this one is the starting time, start time, and then this one is the ending time, and I can get the difference. So console.log, the ending time is bigger, remember, so end minus start is going to give us the number of milliseconds. And I can divide by 1,000 to get the number of seconds. Okay, and then I can run this and see that took about 0.95 seconds. So I need to increase my loop size a little bit. So we'll do 1 billion. There we go. So that took almost a second. All right, and if I increase that with one more zero, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, yeah, 10 billion times. This should take approximately 9 seconds. We'll see. But this is an excellent way to time things, and this you use this more often than a lot of the other date functionality. You do use date functionality a lot, though. Almost any system is going to have some amount of dates, especially any transaction orders. You put things in the shopping cart, you made a purchase. So dates are a highly important part of JavaScript and just computer science in general. All right, so we see that it took 12 seconds to complete this loop that ran 10 billion times. Okay, so that's pretty fast, a little bit faster than we can count, so that's good. But again, what's really nice about this date function is the start and end and timing things like that. The date function has a lot of additional functionality as well. We can look up all of the properties, JavaScript date. And usually MDM or W3 schools have a nice view. You can create the date. You can create a date from a certain number of milliseconds, or you can use the date string, or you can use the ISO string. And so you can duplicate a date that way. So that's important. You can get the date, and notice that it returns just the day of the month, right? Get day returns the day of the week. Get full year returns the year, right? So knowing where to look this stuff up is really important, because as you can see, there's just for dates alone, there's, you know, several, what is that, 50 different methods, right? There's a lot of different methods, and it's hard to remember exactly what they all do. So having a resource that you can look up and remember what every single thing, every bit of functionality is available on the object is really nice. Okay, so don't be afraid to look up in the documentation how these things work. All right. So let's see. That is the date function. Is there anything else about the date function we should need? I don't think so. I think that should be pretty good. But one thing you could do with the date function is try to make a clock, right? And we're gonna mess with that next time. We want our clock to update every so many seconds, right? Or under a second, so we always get good constant time. But we're going to use this date function to get the exact time. All right. So that's enough for dates for now.